In the summer of 1853, fishermen off the coast of Japan saw something impossible. 4 massive iron monsters emerged from the sea mist. They were belching black smoke, bristling with cannons, and moving directly against the wind, without a single sail. The fishermen had never seen anything like it. Neither had Japan's government. What happened in the weeks that followed set off a chain reaction so dramatic, so violent, that historians still can't find anything else like it. A feudal nation, completely sealed off from the rest of the world for over 200 years, would within one single generation build a modern army, a modern navy, and a world-class economy, not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was extinction. The Black Ships, July 8, 1853. Commodore Matthew Perry of the United States Navy sailed straight into Uraga Bay with 4 massive warships. 2 of them were steam-powered iron vessels, technology the Japanese didn't even have a word for. So, they gave them a terrifying nickname, Kurofune, the Black Ships. Perry carried a personal letter from the U.S. President. Now, the tone of the letter was incredibly polite. But the substance? It was a brutal ultimatum. Open your ports to American trade, accept our ships, give us your coal, protect our sailors, or face the consequences. Japan's leaders weren't stupid. They understood exactly what those gunships in the harbor were saying. They had just watched what happened to China. Just 11 years earlier, the British Empire had absolutely crushed the mighty Qing Dynasty in the First Opium War, a massive civilization of hundreds of millions of people, humiliated by Western cannons, forced to sign away its land and its sovereignty. And now, Japan was looking down the exact same barrel. Perry left. But before he did, he promised to return with twice as many ships for his answer. And he was a man of his word. The price of weakness. When Perry came back in February 1854, he didn't bring 4 ships. He brought 8. Japan had 0 leverage. They had no choice. They signed the Convention of Kanagawa. They opened 2 ports. They promised to protect shipwrecked American sailors. They bent the knee, quietly, to a new reality. But the concessions didn't stop there. Over the next few years, Western powers backed Japan into a corner, forcing them to sign trade agreements so one-sided they would haunt the nation for decades. These treaties stripped Japan of its legal rights. Foreign citizens who committed crimes on Japanese soil couldn't even be tried in Japanese courts. They were tried by their own people. They were called the Ansei Treaties, but Japanese history books call them what they actually were, the Unequal Treaties. The military government that had ruled Japan for 250 years, the Tokugawa Shogunate, was exposed. In front of the entire nation, they were completely powerless. But what came next wasn't just shame. What came next was absolute fury. A nation divided against itself. Inside Japan, those treaties triggered a political earthquake. The government argued that giving in was the only way to survive. But the powerful regional lords, the daimyo, disagreed. Violently. Suddenly, a radical movement ignited around 4 simple words. Sonnō joy. Revere the emperor. Expel the barbarians. Young samurai across the country decided to take matters into their own hands. Assassination became a political tool. Foreign officials were ambushed. Government allies were butchered in broad daylight. Some regions even decided to test their luck against Western firepower. In 1863, the Choshu domain opened fire on Western ships passing through the Shimonoseki Strait. The response? Swift and brutal. A combined Western fleet reduced their coastal forts to absolute rubble in a matter of hours. The next year, British warships bombarded the city of Kagoshima because a British merchant had been killed by samurai. In both cases, the lesson was clear, cold, and undeniable. You cannot expel what you cannot defeat. And that's when something unbelievable happened. The 2 rival domains that had just been publicly humiliated by the West, bitter enemies who hated each other for generations, looked at each other. and formed a secret alliance. The end of the shogunate. This alliance, forged in the shadows, would completely topple an empire. They had learned the hard way. You can't fight modern battles with swords and samurai tradition. The only way to survive the West was to become something the West could no longer bully. By 1868, the weakened, humiliated military government collapsed under the pressure. A short, bloody civil war broke out, and the shogun's forces were utterly defeated. Power was handed back to the emperor. His name was Mutsuhito. He was only 15 years old. But the world would remember him by a different title, Emperor Meiji. The era he started would become the most explosive, transformative period in Japanese history, maybe even in human history, because Emperor Meiji and the brilliant minds around him made a choice that most nations never have the courage to make. They decided to change everything. The architects of modern Japan. The emperor was young, but his advisors were ruthless realists. They were a tight circle of visionary reformers, young samurai who saw the future before anyone else did. Men like Okubo Toshimichi, a cold, calculating strategist who rebuilt the country's entire financial foundation from scratch. He centralized power and redirected every single scrap of Japan's resources toward modernization with iron discipline. Then there was Kido Takayoshi, the brains behind rewriting the laws, who knew that Japan didn't just need modern guns, it needed a modern government. And perhaps the most influential, Ito Hirobumi, a young man who, years earlier, had literally tried to burn down a British building. By 1871, he was sitting on a ship, traveling across the West, studying their civilization from the inside out. These men weren't daydreamers. They understood that the only way to tear up those humiliating, unequal treaties was to make Japan so powerful that the West would never dare look down on them again. But not everyone was on board. And the man who disagreed happened to be the most beloved warrior in the country. The last samurai. His name was Saigō Takamori, and he was the greatest warrior of his generation. Saigō actually helped start this whole revolution. He fought to bring down the old government. He believed in a stronger Japan. But as the years rolled on, he watched his country turn into something he no longer recognized. The samurai class was officially abolished. Carrying a sword in public was banned. The ancient warrior caste that had defined the soul of Japan for centuries was dissolved with the stroke of a pen. To Saigō, this wasn't progress. This was cultural suicide. In 1877, he led an army of furious, forgotten samurai in a desperate final stand. The Satsuma Rebellion. It was the ancient world colliding directly with the modern machine. The new government didn't send samurai to fight him. They sent a modern army of conscripted farmers and merchants armed with Western repeating rifles. And those regular citizens defeated Japan's greatest warriors. Saigō Takamori died on a hillside in Kagoshima, taking his own life by ritual suicide, just as tradition demanded. His rebellion failed, but Japan never forgot him. Today, his bronze statue stands tall in Tokyo's Ueno Park, not as a traitor, but as a tragic hero, a symbol of a painful truth, that sometimes, to gain immense power, you have to lose something irreplaceable. Japan goes to school with the world. While the rebellion was being crushed in the South, the government was executing one of the most audacious nation-building projects ever attempted. In 1871, a massive delegation of over 100 top Japanese officials boarded ships for a 22-month global tour of America and Europe. It was called the Iwakura Mission. And they weren't there to negotiate. They were there to steal secrets. They walked through steel mills in Pennsylvania. They watched debates in the British Parliament. They studied school systems in France and military tactics in Germany. They didn't just return with ideas. They returned with a literal blueprint for a new civilization. What followed was a top-down revolution. In just 2 decades, they built a national railroad, connected the islands with telegraph lines, created a public school system that shot literacy rates through the roof. They built an army based on Prussia's and a navy engineered by the British. Banks, courts, hospitals, modern universities, everything built all at once. But here is the genius part. Japan wasn't just copying the West. They were doing something much smarter. They took what worked, threw out what didn't, and wrapped the foreign technology around deeply rooted Japanese values. They had a phrase for this philosophy: Wakan Yosai, Japanese spirit, Western knowledge. And it worked perfectly. The first test. By 1890, Japan had a written constitution and an elected parliament. The world was starting to realize that this was no longer the fragile island nation that had panicked at Perry's arrival. The real test came in 1894. Japan and China went to war over control of Korea. On paper, China was a massive empire with seemingly endless resources. Japan was just a small island that had started modernizing barely 25 years prior. The war lasted exactly 8 months. Japan completely dominated on land and at sea. The West was stunned. An Asian nation had just dismantled a historic empire using flawless modern tactics and high-tech coordination. Japan didn't just win, they took control of Taiwan and forced China to pay mass. Japan didn't just win, they took control of Taiwan and forced China to pay massive financial damages. Japan had officially arrived, not as a student of the global game, but as a major player. Final insight and cliffhanger. What Japan pulled off between 1853 and 1895 has no parallel. In 40 years, a feudal society completely broke itself down and rebuilt itself into a modern superpower. It worked because Japan's leaders understood a brutal truth that failing nations refuse to accept. Survival sometimes requires the willingness to destroy what you love most about yourself. Not to lose your identity, but to carry it forward into a world that will not wait for you. The samurai gave way to the soldier. Isolation gave way to global power. But this massive transformation created something unsettling. The ambitions brewing inside Japan's new modern institutions were becoming incredibly dangerous. Japan had just proven it could defeat China. But what happened next shocked Tokyo to its core. 3 Western superpowers, Russia, Germany, and France, stepped in. They bullied Japan, forcing them to give back the land they had just won on the battlefield. Japan had to obey. They still weren't strong enough, but behind closed doors in Tokyo, a dark question was burning. How long would Japan allow European capitals to write the rules of the world? And what would they be willing to do to rewrite those rules forever?